Yeah.
Right, welcome class, welcome Bob and Joy to our second lesson.
Hi Phil.
Today we've got a few things to cover. Firstly, we're going to learn to use vocabulary relating to life stories, to people's life stories. Secondly, we're going to learn about the past simple tense of the irregular verb to be, and we'll explain exactly what that means when we get to it. And lastly, we'll be practicing some pronunciation of unstressed words in sentences. So, as I mentioned, the language that we're covering today is related to famous people's life stories. So if I could firstly focus your attention on part 2 on your activity sheets in front of you, and you can see we've got 3 photos. A photo of 3 famous people, and we've also got 3 incomplete texts describing their life stories. So firstly, let's just match up the pictures with the texts. Who have we got? Joy up here in these photos. Are you familiar with who this?
I know that one. I don't know these two. I know that one.
Okay, and who's he?
He sings pop music.
Yes.
Elvis
Presley, that's right. And then the other 2, Bob, have you got any idea who we're looking at here? Have a look at the text. We've got some names to choose from. We've got 3 texts and 3 photos.
Yeah. Now that the face of letter B is a very familiar face. You see that everywhere. That's Albert Einstein.
That's right. So by our powers of deduction, the 3rd photo there must be Winston Churchill.
Who was he?
Well, we'll learn about that in a moment. But yes, he was the Prime Minister of Britain many years ago. So what I'll have you do now is just working individually with your worksheets. If you could do a gap fill. So we've got some missing words here, and we've got some words to choose from to fill in those gaps up here above the text. So I'll just run through the first example. So the first sentence regarding Elvis Presley says he was a famous American, and from our choices up the top here, the most appropriate answer would be singer. Elvis Presley, he was a famous American singer. So if I could just get you guys to...
What's that word?
Pianist, yes, it's a funny word, isn't it, Joy? Pianist. What? A pianist is someone who plays the piano. So that's one of your words that you need to put into the gap fill. So if you guys want to get started on that, there are some pens on the table. Is anybody having any difficulty with that activity? I see you're both working your way through them.
You want us to do the three of them?
Yes, please, Bob. Alright, Bob's finished, and I think Joy's just finished also. Yes, right. Okay, so we'll go through the answers together as a class. Perhaps, Joy, I might have you read your answers to the text on Elvis Presley. If you could just read through each of the sentences.
Elvis Presley. He was a famous American singer.
Yes, that's
correct. He was
correct.
famous for his music. He was born in 1935 in Mississippi, USA. His parents were and I couldn't decide whether they were poor or rich.
Yes, we had a choice there between rich and poor, didn't we?
It was a difficult time in the American economy.
So that was a clue then, wasn't it, to the fact that his parents would have been poor rather than rich if the economy was having a difficult time. Yes, that's right. Joy, you got all of those correct. Bob, if I could get you to read your answers to the text on Albert Einstein.
Yeah. He was a German scientist. He was famous for his theory of relativity. He was born in 1879 in Germany. His father was a businessman and his mother was a pianist.
That's right, Joy. That's where that pianist word came in. Albert Einstein's mother was a pianist. Okay.
She played the piano.
Yes. Okay. And Joy, I'll get you to finish off here and read your answers to the text on Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill. He was the Prime Minister of Britain from 1940 to 1945 and 1950-1951. He was born in England in 1874. His parents were rich and famous. His father was a politician.
Very good, Joy. That was an unfamiliar word, wasn't it?
And his mother was the daughter of an American millionaire.
Millionaire, exactly right. Yes, well, you've both completed that activity with flying colours. So we'll just move on now, and I'll bring your attention to part 3 on your activity sheets.
Phil,
Yes.
what do you mean with flying colours?
Oh, okay. I have no idea. That's a colloquial term, not necessarily purely Australian, but it might have something to do with flying the colours of the flag, but it's generally a term that we use when we praising someone for doing something very well, or for achieving, doing something with flying colours. Right.
So it was a compliment.
It was a compliment, Bob, yes. That's right. Okay, so now, with part 3 of the activity sheet, if we could just look at the first 4 sentences at the top of the page, and I'll actually read them aloud to you. Elvis Presley was a famous American singer. Albert Einstein was born in 1879 in Germany. Elvis Presley's parents were very poor. And Winston Churchill's parents were rich and famous. Now, if I can draw your attention to the words in bold in each of those sentences. Elvis Presley was, in bold, a famous American singer. Albert Einstein was born in 1879. Elvis Presley's parents were very poor. And Winston Churchill's parents were rich and famous. Now those words in bold are what we call irregular verbs, and we will now move on to do some drilling activities of the use of those 2 irregular verbs. Those irregular verbs are specifically the past tense forms. So when we're speaking about things that have already happened, the past tense forms of the irregular verb to be. So if you can look down next at the table there, we've got a table that's got quite a bit of information in it, so we'll work our way through that. What we can see is this table is showing us how to match up those 2 irregular verbs, was and were, with the appropriate subjects. Now by subjects, I'm talking about I. So I, when I'm speaking about myself. He, when we're speaking about a male. So we could be speaking about Bob. She is when we're speaking about a female. We could be speaking about Joy. And it. It is when we're not talking about a person, we're talking about an object or a place or a thing. So what we can see here in the first part of the table, the first example here, I was. So we could say, I was famous, or I was going for a walk. And following on from that, we can also see he was, she was, and it was. So I'll get you to repeat those after me now. I was.
I was.
I was.
He was.
He was.
He was.
She was.
She was.
was.
And it was.
It was.
Right. Now, if we look to the next part of the table, we can see three more subjects. We can see we. So that's we, all of us as a group, we. You, if I was speaking not about me, but about you, Bob, or you, Joy. And they is when we're speaking about someone else, someone other than ourselves. So if we match up those subjects with the correct irregular verb, we now have we were. We were shopping. We were going for a walk. And we also have you were and they were. So if you could repeat those after me. We were.
We were.
We were.
You were.
You were.
And they were.
And they were.
Right. So these are all positive statements. I was, she was, we were. Now we can look at the same choice of subjects and irregular verbs in the negative form. So repeat after me. I was not.
I was not.
Now what contraction do we use there often when we say was not? A shortening of those two words.
It wasn't.
Wasn't, that's correct. So I wasn't. And repeat after me. He wasn't.
He wasn't.
He wasn't.
She wasn't.
She wasn't.
It wasn't.
It
It
wasn't.
wasn't.
And then the next part of the table. We were not. What contraction do we regularly use there with were not to shorten those two words?
Weren't.
Weren't, that's right, Bob. So repeat after me. We weren't.
We weren't.
Weren't.
You weren't.
You
weren't.
They weren't.
They weren't.
So we can now see that we use the subjects I, he, she, and it with I was, I wasn't, and we were, and we weren't. So the same rules follow, not just when we're making statements like we've just done, but when we're asking and answering short questions. So the next part of the table looks at using the same language using questions. So repeat after me. Was I famous?
Was I famous?
Was I famous?
Was he famous?
Was
he
famous?
Was she famous?
Was
she famous?
Was it famous?
Was it famous?
That's right. And the answers to those, repeat after me. Yes, I was.
Yes, I was.
Yes, he was.
Yes, he was.
Yes, she was.
Yes, she was.
And yes, it was.
Yes, it was.
And the final part of the table there uses the second form of the irregular verb, were.
Where's that coming from?
Bob's phone's going off. We'll just let it ring out.
Where is it?
Okay, get up. Okay. Repeat after me. Were we famous?
Were we famous?
Were you famous?
Were you famous?
Were they famous?
Were they famous?
Bob, you back with us?
Just a tick.
Yeah.
Better. Sorry, Phil.
Yes, we were.
Yes, we were.
Yes, you were.
Yes, you were.
Yes, you were.
Yes, they were.
Yes, they were.
That, and now the negative forms of those questions and answers. No, we weren't.
No, we weren't.
No, you weren't.
No, you weren't.
And no, they weren't.
No, they weren't.
So we can see, as a general rule, whether we're making statements or whether we're asking or answering questions, we use the subjects together with the irregular verbs in this fashion. We use I, he, she, and it with was, and in the negative form wasn't, and we use we, you, and they together with were, or in the negative form weren't. So let's